It's the 19th of February, 2016, and this is episode 44 of the Unseen Podcast. I'm your host tonight, Paul Carr, and with me tonight are Adam Smith.
Hey, everyone.
Ciro Villa.
Good evening, Paul.
Nick Nielsen.
Hello, and happy Copernicus birthday.
And Patrick Festa.
Cheers.
Now, if you're a regular listener, you've met all of these guys before several times, so we won't go over their bios. There's a panelist page at unseenpodcast.com. You can learn more about all these folks there, including myself, if you're really that curious. Episode 44, like every other episode, when we don't have a special guest, we have a topics thread where we try to converge on what the topic should be. And this week, all these four panelists have contributed to that, so that's why they're here. And tonight we're talking about what happens in the event of an ETI detection. ETI meaning extraterrestrial intelligence. Actually, not my favorite acronym, since I don't think we have a good definition of intelligence, but extraterrestrial, technological extraterrestrial civilization, which is also a lousy acronym. As you probably know, various scientists working with extremely limited funding have been looking for these extraterrestrial civilizations for many years, going back to about 1960 in Project Ozma. If you want to learn more about SETI, I'll have some links in the show notes at unseenpodcast.com. The WOW signal has done quite a few podcast episodes on SETI. So what we'd like to do is talk about where what would happen if SETI is successful. If after lots and lots of rigorous scientific review and multiple detections on multiple antennas, which would we can also talk about whether that's really a good criterion or not. But let's assume, for the sake of argument, that Seth Shostak and Jill Tarter and Andrew Simeon and all those other, even Frank Drake totters in. The man's well into his 80s now, but he's still pretty lucid. If they all come up and say, we are absolutely certain that we can tell you that an extraterrestrial civilization is located at a particular location. We have done all the checks. We have lots and lots of scientists weigh in, and they all agree. So that's the scenario. Okay. We're not talking about Independence Day, although, we can talk about that too if you want, or the day the Earth stood still. I consider those sort of science fiction scenarios much more about people than it is about ET. But this is actually about ET. We've found them. We know they exist. They could be a long way away. It could be hundreds or even thousands of light years away. They may even be millions of light years away. Okay, so now there's an existing protocol. Shall we sort of step through that, or do you guys want to just talk about what you think the protocol should be?
As you say, there is an existing protocol that's been thrashed out mainly by the SETI committee of the International Astronomical, or is it the International Association of Aeronautics, I think, something like that.
The IAU.
Astronomics.
Yeah.
It was astronomics.
Yeah. It's fairly straightforward. I've been looking at it.
It's a subcommittee or so.
Today. And it is exactly what you would expect. You know, they say that any discovery, a credible discovery with good evidence of extraterrestrial intelligence, the discoverers have to inform the Central Bureau for the International Astronomical Union, the Secretary General of the United Nations, the International Telecommunications Union, various committees, international bodies, Commission 51 of the International Astronomical Union, you know, the Joint International Radio Science.
Sorry, did you say Commission 52 or 51?
Commission 51.
Okay, well.
Excuse the interruption.
Yeah.
Antonio has been saying that he can't get in.
Yeah, I know. That's all right. Okay, continue.
And they call for prompt, wide, open dissemination of all the detection data. They say it should be made available to the international scientific community and the public via public media. And that's about it. There are various other things, like they say the appropriate frequency, if it's electromagnetic signals, should be protected, which is a good idea. And no response should be made until the appropriate international consultations have been made, and that's an important thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, okay. So first thing we should point out to all the conspiracy theorists out there that this protocol calls for a very open disclosure of what we know and how we know it, right? So it's not, it's not going to be behind closed doors sort of discussion. It's not like the NSA is going to march in to the SETI Institute and say, you guys have to shut up and we're going to not let anybody know. This has already been discussed in advance. This is all going to be, and of course it could be any radio telescope in the world. It could be the Parkes Observatory in Australia. It could be the Jodrell Bank in England. It could be lots of them. So there's not going to be it's not a U.S. only thing by any means, and it's not going to be a secretive thing at all. Now that you're going to kind of let the chips fall where they may in terms of cultural reaction to that.
Yeah, I want to address that. In other words, I was reading through the protocols quickly, and everything that Adam said, about the full disclosure and the proper channels and all that stuff. But I wonder, because of what you're mentioning, the conspiracy theories, the panic of the society, I'm wondering what would be done. Say, yes, we've spotted one, and what is the? I think there's some missing protocols about how to, what does the communication say, or is it just?
Well, no. Well, first of all,
is it just that we recognize there's somebody out there?
This is not has nothing to do with the any content of any communication that we receive. It's simply we now have clear evidence that there is the existence of an ET civilization.
Oh, okay. So it's not about they're on their way or communication with them or anything like that. It's just
if they're on their way, then it's all bets are off, right?
Okay, that's what I'm asking. That's what I'm saying. In other words, you're talking about we discovered a planet somewhere out there that we definitely have.
Well, you would not even know you may not know there's a planet there, but you'll see there's a signal, and the signal is clearly not a natural one.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
In other words, we're talking about discovering a definite proof of a civilization out there, not that we've ever actually made any contact.
Well,
is that correct?
Two-way contact could take thousands of years.
Okay. Well, I mean, we didn't make. Well, okay.
Or hundreds
in other
of
words,
years.
They didn't send us the signal. We just
at a minimum, it's going to be tens of years. right? So you're not. Yeah, it's a one way. We know they're there.
Okay, so we discovered a civilization. There's definitely a living planet out there, and the protocols.
Well, I didn't say anything about planets. I don't want to assume that.
Or a living civilization, and we.
Well, they were
So
living
yeah.
when they set the signal.
Okay.
I think that
What I'm
the
asking,
nature of
I'm asking is, are we talking about a signal sent to us, or are we talking about the discovery of say an exoplanet that definitely has proof? We have proof that there is a civilization on there. That's what I'm asking.
It's not exoplanet. It's not. We are so far from being able to do that I don't think that's part of the protocol.
The protocol itself is just like Paul saying, it's mostly for a detection of a signal per se. But to expand on that, and one thing that I want to introduce that we might be talking about more is what's called the Rio scale, which Paul might be familiar with, which is some sort of a way to index different contact events. It was it was designed envisioned by a couple of scientists in the early 2000s, and it was a way to kind of quantify the type and the quality, if you want, of the purported contacts that humans had with the different with the extraterrestrial intelligence, whether it scales from all the way from a potential signal to the detection of an artificial astro artifact, all the way down to a possible physical contact. It comes from a mathematical formula. There's a couple of calculators online that allow the public to go ahead and play around with different parameters. And the scale is a 1 to 10. Actually, it's kind of a 0 to 10 scale. There was another similar scale.
I thought it was 0 to
10.
0 to 6.
Okay,
Is it?
from what I gather,
Oh, okay, I see. Zero is none, basically,
Right.
and 10 is extraordinary. Okay.
what I was gathering from what you were saying, Paul, was that I was trying to figure out what you meant by exactly definitively. You were saying that we received a signal, meaning that I automatically inferred an exoplanet. I automatically inferred a planet out there somewhere that has a signal coming from it. So it was a one-way signal. Did we detect it as a civilization just, without them knowing about it, or did we get a communication from that? That's what I'm trying to find.
that as Ciro just mentioned, there's actually the Rio scale sort of takes into account whether and when more sensitive telescopes come online, like the square kilometer array that's coming up in the next few years, we might have a small chance of actually eavesdropping on another civilization. But right now, the telescopes we have can really only detect a signal that is sent to us deliberately. And, and that signal by signal, I don't mean like a video of, hello, this is Zoink from Zeta Reticuli. I mean a beacon that would just say, we are here, right? It doesn't.
Okay, so you're talking about everything that you had said in the beginning of this conversation. You were saying that we received this, hypothetically, we received the signal that, hello, we are here, without any particular place in mind that they were sending it to. And we
would know where it was coming from.
So that's what you're saying. You're saying that we have definitive signal and the protocol says that we have to be, invisible about the, and transparent about the, not invisible, and transparent about the protocol says that we have to tell, certain authorities or whatever. So you're saying that
not just certain authorities. We have to tell everybody, the whole planet.
Okay. Jesus, hang on.
Jesus, is that Jesus back there?
Don't you think that the more people
the Men in Black just walked into his room.
Don't you think that the more people insist upon the openness of the process, the more people who believe it's not open are going to, say, well, this is what you're saying in public, but there are other things going on behind the scene?
Sure, they'll say that no matter what you do, right?
All I'm trying to do here is, because I was trying to get the societal, implications of this, and all I was trying to do was define exactly what you were saying in the beginning of the conversation. So I was just sort of Reader's Digesting the everything that you said in the beginning. So I'm trying to define it as you're talking about a signal that we received, basically somebody out there waving their hand to the rest of the universe, and we picked it up.
Right.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's a we are hello, we are here.
Okay.
And probably not much more information than that.
So
there are ways to send more information than that, but
okay. So now I'm thinking, what does this mean for society? So the transparency is that everybody has to be told about this, and how will society respond? And considering what I see, people like, oh my God, it's like, like I don't know what's going to happen. I know how I would respond. I would be overjoyed and thrilled and all that stuff. But as you mentioned, the conspiracy theorists and stuff, we don't know anything from panic to happiness. I'm not sure what'll happen. So how do we handle that? What is the protocol on telling the public? Like, how do we actually bring that to the public? Hey, we've discovered.
That's actually written down. And by the way, this is not something that somebody just thought of over a couple of whiskeys. This has been hashed out over many years by a lot of distinguished people, but
it's online. It's online for everyone to read.
Yes, it is. And the summary of it is that they make recordings available and all the data available to the international community. There's no really question of any nation owning the information or any private party. It has supposedly, in accordance with Article 11 of the Treaty on Principles Governing the Activities of States and the Exploration and Use of Outer Space, which is a UN article, and it goes essentially what the protocol calls for is complete openness, not only in the scientific community but with the public. And there's something
because I read through the protocols. I admit I only read through them quickly, but it didn't seem to specifically define the actual what takes place now. Pretending, like you said, gave a hypothetical.
It doesn't. The protocol does not try to control what happens. It just says, "Here's the information."
Right.
And the only thing it does, as Ciro pointed out already, it says, "Let's protect those frequencies." Right. Stay away.
Yeah, there's a sequence of events that's supposed to take place. Now, first of all, one thing I don't know if we mentioned that or not already, but as far as I know from my relatively brief research on the subject matter, this protocol has not been ratified by any particular government on Earth. So it's basically more of a scientifically accepted document.
Right. Well, the United States government isn't even allowed to fund SETI activity.
Exactly.
So. Now, so what this serves for is as a model, as a for the scientific community, how the scientific community should behave in this case, and I think the scientific community largely accepts it, to the extent that they accept SETI at all, SETI is very poorly funded everywhere. Even with Breakthrough Initiative, it's still, a very tiny, Breakthrough Initiative is $10 million a year. That by some scientific standards of some scientific budgets is a trickle of money. By SETI standards, it's a lot, but that is, so we have this we have these people basically working as volunteers, putting this protocol together.
Right, and I think that that one of the problem. Well, I don't know if it's not a problem for the time being in the status quo where everything is hypothetical. It's fine and dandy, but if something were to occur, well, first of all, let's go ahead and step back for a second. I think that one of the things that Patrick was talking about was anthropomorphic reaction, and as a matter of fact. What does it mean? Some scientists have said that the way that we perceive a potential contact with an extraterrestrial intelligence right now is more from an anthropomorphic standpoint. In other words, where we reflect into the potential reaction when we have a possible contact, we reflect what the human nature is. We reflect what our reaction is historically when we had contacts with other civilizations on Earth, for example. Point is that it doesn't mean that a contact with an extraterrestrial civilization is going to be necessarily what our anticipation and what our expectation is going to be. So that's one point that I want to make. The other one is that there's a wide variety of types of contacts that one may be speaking of. We can go from, there's a signal outside of the galaxy or within our galaxy that we have detected a possible signal, all the way to, hey, somebody has seen an alien being and it's been verified by more than one person right here on Earth. So there's a wide range of potential, types of contacts that we might be speaking of.
Yeah, I mean the type of contact that this protocol addresses is either we detect some kind of clear example of astroengineering, where we've got a unambiguous signal that somebody has built some huge thing out there, or
exactly
like the Dyson Swarm is probably the most famous known example, but and people like Jason Wright have been looking for those in the data that we already have. Or there's we'd find a beacon, like a Benford beacon or a more classical beacon like they were looking for in Project Ozma, that's aimed right at us for an extended period of time, which is in the Benford's view pretty unlikely. They think you would probably get a beacon that very brief, and then that, because let's face it, I mean the two-way microwave bubble, that in terms of detectable microwaves coming out from the Earth and then coming back to Earth, is only about 34, 35 light years in radius. It's not a very big bubble. It every year it gets bigger and there's more stars out there. That in terms of other civilizations that know we are here. So those are the civilizations that, if they wanted to contact us, would actually focus a beacon on us. So that's getting more likely every year at an increasing rate. But right now, the vast majority of the galaxy doesn't know that there's a technological civilization on planet Earth, even if they have very sophisticated astronomers. So, and tremendously advanced telescopes. So,
but if they sent out mass Bracewell probes to every system that had a potential habitable planet, and they did so millions of years ago, or even just hundreds of thousands ago, or tens of thousands of years ago, they would have something positioned in a solar system that could respond to any technological civilization that had happened to encounter. And I might mention, in relation to Bracewell probes, that the possibility of a Bracewell probe shows the difficulty of making a clear a black and white distinction between a SETI detection would imply something far away and if you will forgive me, a close encounter, first contact. Because then if people learned that there was an alien artifact in the solar system that we had begun to communicate with, I think it would have a different impact than saying, yes, 1,500 light years away, there's an alien artifact, and we don't have to worry about it in the immediate term.
Right. Well, a Bracewell probe is a very different scenario. I agree with that.
Well, that's where I was elating to before. In other words, the idea that Okay, stop calling me now. The idea that an alien probe or of sorts would be perhaps picked up. Not to get too far fetched or into UFOs or anything, but let's just go into the fantasy a little bit. The signal you spoke of is one thing, but what if, say, just like that sci-fi book, a long-range telescope were to pick up an object that seems to be headed into our solar system? Maybe it was a spacecraft, maybe it was just a space probe with a robotic probe to communicate with us. Or, in other words, what would be the protocol? In other words, we don't know what they're coming for. We don't, so let's just say we verified that this thing was in fact.
Well, I've spent some time thinking about that. I should write it down more, but
so what would be?
It's a different scenario. It is a very different, because, and here's the reason why.
Like, how would we find out? How do we go about learning what the heck is going on?
Well, we would detect. It would not be difficult to detect that the signals come from their own solar system. That would be the easy part. The hard part would be, what do we do next? Because it's out there, and now you've got all the petty interests on planet Earth who want to get access to that technology.
Right. I mean,
and the Bracewell probe may or may not be able to maneuver as it needs to. It's presumably some kind of autonomous robotic probe that's designed to contact a civilization when it reaches a certain level of maturity, which is what Bracewell envisioned in his 1960 paper in Nature. And he thought that there might be it might just be a very sophisticated robot that would sit there and wait for us to reach a certain level of maturity or survive a certain great filter, and then say, okay, you guys get to know about the superior galactic community that's out there, and here's all the dope on that, and presumably it could give us a lot of information.
Yeah, I mean, in other words, I envision the idiots on this planet, seeing Orson Scott Card's version of this alien spacecraft coming in to wipe us out. But I don't see it that way. I see that they have the same physics restraints that we have, but they managed to send out a probe, say maybe 1,000 years ago from 1,000 light years away, and it
could have been millions of years ago.
Right, from millions, whatever. And so there's this probe headed towards us, and a telescope picks it up, and maybe the asteroid hunters found the moving object. It was very shiny or something, and starting to reflect the sun, or maybe it has a light.
Well, there's actually a few candidate objects like that, but
right. So in other words, what would we be thinking? What is this? This is now. Let's go with the hypothetical situation where we've definitely identified this as an alien-made object, a probe of sorts.
Well, there I think the protocol would be a little different for a couple of reasons. One is we're probably going to get much more information than we would get from just a beacon from 1,000 light years away. And the second thing is, that the major governments on Earth are all going to want to get a piece of this thing, right?
That's exactly what I mean about the society thing. In other words, I'm right away I worried about all the militaries on the planet.
There's going to be an obvious initial period where, let's just play, right? Hypothetical here. A Bracewell probe is first there's something identified. We don't know it's a Bracewell probe, right? At first, but first of all, a lot of people are not going to know. There's a lot of a portion of the population that doesn't understand what a Bracewell probe is in the first place. So, if public opinion is not necessarily, Paul can explain it better than I can.
It was Ronald Bracewell who felt that it would be reasonable to expect advanced civilizations to send probes.
Oh, that's exactly what I was saying.
Scatter them all over the galaxy and wait for planets like ours that still have very primitive life forms on them to reach a certain level of maturity, however they may judge that. And, you may think that, Obviously, we haven't reached that yet, but when they reach that level, and they could conceal themselves very effectively. They could make themselves almost impossible to detect, and just wait until they feel we're ready for the information, and then transmit it to us.
Okay, so yeah, all right. So
there's a lot of
it's basically what I was thinking. In other words, a probe comes into the solar system.
Well, there's a lot of variations, on the basic theme. Of course, there's different hypothetical type of objects that could be coming with different varied level of technology.
Well, I'm talking about just Bracewell's
Specifically
concept.
Bracewell Probe.
Yeah.
Which
Which a pretty simple concept, and it didn't involve. I mean, you could talk about what if the Bracewell Probe is no longer functional. It might be millions of years old. It might be derelict. You could talk about, lots of things. I think the idea of a hostile probe is extremely difficult to understand. Because
I find that one a little less.
What would they have to gain from that?
Yeah, I see more like what if we were on the other end of the deal of our Voyager probes going out? 1,000 years from now, some alien civilization picks up the signals that the Voyager somehow keeps transmitting. Maybe it got some sunshine from.
Well, no, the Voyager won't be transmitting 1,000 years.
I'm just giving the.
It won't have any power.
Situation, pretending that there was a Voyager-like probe sent from another planet that lasts even longer than the Voyagers have lasted. Say that an alien. In other words, put us on the other side of put us on the receiving end of this Voyager probe coming from another solar system, and spotting it. That would be the probes that you're talking about. Only they're more sophisticated.
No, a lot more sophisticated, a lot more long-lived.
The archaeological type of probe.
It would
are just derelict, like the Voyager would be by the time it gets anywhere.
Yeah, Voyager is not going to survive that long.
Right.
It'll just be a piece of space junk when it arrives where somebody else can find it, and chances are they won't be able to find it.
I'm just giving the hypothetical, putting the shoe on the other foot. We sent that thing out there with information of us, hoping that somebody would find it.
But that was it was a long shot. But
putting the shoe on the other foot. What if we were the ones that were finding this probe that came from, somewhere else?
Well, we look at the naked aliens and listen to their equivalent of the Beatles and
Johnny Be Good. Johnny Be Good,
yeah. Well, I mean, and probably find, they call that music, and but
I mean, I think that there's a lot of. I mean, if we really want to go ahead and start extrapolating on the idea of a probe coming from another civilization that is visiting our solar system, and outside of the typical Bracewell probe, and you can come up with all kind of different fictional scenarios, right? I mean, does the modern technology, astronomical technology, allow us to recognize what kind of what the physical characteristics this probe has, and at what distance? Is the type of question that I would ask right now.
Well, that's actually an interesting question, but the answers are not easy to come up with. I mean, if I wanted to hide something in the solar system, even with current technology, I could do it pretty easily.
Oh yeah.
An artifact also might be completely inscrutable. We can't assume it's going to be transmitting. If we find something, it might just be a discovery that there is something there that is not natural. It's probably artificially produced. We have absolutely no information beyond there. And then the question becomes, what's the planetary reaction to
exactly That's the thing, the anthropomorphic reaction to the unknown. That's
that's like that's Arthur C. Clarke has already thought through probably all these scenarios.
I can imagine space archaeologists going out there and saying, let's just say this Voyager probe came to us from somewhere else. We're the ones that are finding it, and they somehow aimed it to this star, and they know that this star was where they were aiming at, and maybe hundreds of thousands of years, it finally reached into our solar system. We spotted it, and it's coming in, and we found it. maybe we send a retrieving craft out there, like the old space shuttle, with the arm or something, and grab it before it actually crashes into the Earth.
It would have to be very close, very darn close to the Earth to be able to do that.
Yeah, we would not see the Voyager. If the Voyager spacecraft was out there right now, we would not see it. We would not know it unless it came very close to Earth.
Yeah. It would have to be an enormous.
Rama.
Come on, you could at least humor me with.
Well, Rama, yeah. Adam just brought Rendezvous with Rama, which is another R.C. Clarke. R.C. Clarke thought of the monolith right on the moon, right? He thought of the Rendezvous with Rama, which was a big spacecraft that entered our solar system and obviously with intent, but it didn't have any occupants. And you had you had the monolith, which been sitting in the moon for who knows how long, millions of years. All these things are reasonable scenarios, and of course, what happened when they unearthed the monolith? It sent out a signal, right? That would be so. However far away they are, they would find out that we knew about them. That many light years later.
I find it disconcerting that you refuse to humor me with my fantasy.
Well, no, that's not my job, Patrick.
Well,
because just like we sent out the Voyager, and spun it out to a star, and it's going to take a couple 100,000 years to get there. Just like we did that, I'm thinking, put the shoe on the other foot, and somebody did that to us
with a little better.
They pointed it at our star, and it came to us, and we definitely found it. Forget about the impossibilities or the unlikeliness of us seeing it. Let's just say that we did actually find it, and we spotted it, and we went out there to grab it. The archaeological, the space archaeological find would be amazing in scientific terms. Even if this thing is a couple 100,000 years old.
First of all, to be able to grab something is not necessarily an easy feat with today's technology.
No, let's just pretend for a moment. Humor me for a minute. Let's get
if we have the
sci-fi
technology
on it.
to go ahead and grab something of the size of the Voyager with some sort of spacecraft launched
on a hyperbolic trajectory.
Well,
yeah.
I suppose you could do a rendezvous.
Well, maybe it was a little bit more
depending on the
sophisticated
velocity.
Voyager, and it had a slightly longer lasting. Maybe it went to sleep until it woke up, and it was able to grab energy from the sun because it's close enough to grab some light or something. I don't know. Just give me some sci-fi into it. Make up something. Make up a transporter. But the point is, what if the shoe was on the other foot, and we were the ones to find this?
I understand that. But we already talked about. What if you found an artifact, right? Essentially, that's just an artifact.
One question in my mind that comes out of Patrick's hypothetical scenario is, for example, okay, there's one probe that has been identified, and let's say that we have the technology to be able to grab it. So my first question comes up is, who's got the who on Earth, what government on Earth, what country on Earth would have the authority to kind of claim, if you want, this object?
I'm not so sure it would be a question of legal niceties. I think it's just whoever gets there first.
Yes, whoever gets there first, or whoever discovered it and can make a spacecraft fast enough to get up there.
Would claim
if it's anything like the Voyager, would have instructions on how to play the record.
Are you saying whoever discovers it?
It's more like salvage rights, right? Yeah, I mean. Yeah, but I think even then, there's probably not an applicable law that anybody would comply with.
Right.
Well, with that you would comply with, because you can have all kinds of laws and policies and protocols, but when it comes down to who has the technology to go grab something or who has the technology to receive a signal, it's going to end up in the hands of those who have the technology or the power to control the technology.
Certainly.
Yeah, it's going to be whoever gets it. I think it would be an international effort, though. I'm sure.
Then I would never get there.
Well,
it's going to be the scientists who want to grab this thing.
The scientists don't have any money.
The retrieval part of it, I suppose, is probably a little bit more amicable because, like Paul just said, it would be a matter of money. right? So basically, you have to spend the money to grab this thing. Now, the question will happen once you bring this thing down to Earth. What's going to happen? Is the government that retrieved the artifact bringing it back to Earth is the one that can claim ownership of the object, or would an international body be formed, or you know what I mean?
Well, somebody might claim ownership, but possession is possession, right? Whoever has it.
I would think that bringing it down is actually more problematic than somehow grabbing it in orbit. Like for example, we have the space station. Maybe find a way to grab it with a separate small docking ship, like a command module of some sort, and dock it with the space station, and then examine it in space, in orbit. And if it's small enough, I guess you could talk about bringing it to Earth, but I would think that would be more problematic.
Well, you're talking about technologies that are not even 50 or 100 years. I don't know.
Let's consider, for example, that since I'm using the analogy of the Voyager has instructions. It has depictions of wavelength of green light to show what size of people are, and it has a phonograph built in, and it's got instructions on how to play that record, and it's got all these sort of things. So I'm putting the shoe on the other foot, literally. Whereas another civilization sent us this Voyager spacecraft, and it has all those instructions and it's got all kinds of pictures, and maybe they have their own sounds or what have you. And the question would be, how do we grab it? How do we capture it? How do we study it? I
don't want to get into all those details. I mean, the reality is that we're a long way from being able to detect something that small. But if you had something we could detect, it would then it would, and it was able to get into orbit around our star, it would still have some kind of propulsion and power, and it would be in control of the scenario, not us.
Let me suggest yet another scenario, and we can even go back to the original SETI scenario of a detection of a signal, to show that those who hold power or hold technology are going to be the one calling the shots. Somehow Chinese scientists have managed to convince the Chinese government to spend big on big projects because we know that they're building a radio telescope that's bigger than Arecibo. They're also building a big a collider. I don't know if it's going to be bigger than the one at CERN, but it's going to be pretty darn big. So they've somehow managed to convince Chinese leadership that to do first-class science, you need first-class instruments. And so they're building this huge radio telescope. So if Chinese scientists discover a signal when they have their new telescope operational, how confident are you that the Chinese government will even allow these scientists to share the information? Because the Chinese don't even have free access to the internet.
I'm not confident at all.
Yeah. There are no Chinese scientists involved in SETI at all. None. The SETI committee is basically American, Canadian, Australian, and various European countries. I think there's maybe one Mexican and one Argentinian scientist, and that's it. There are no Africans, no Asians, and that is a problem for any potential signal.
Well, there have been Japanese scientists involved in SETI, but like most of Europe, extremely limited funding.
Yeah, sure.
They do it kind of as a hobby.
It strikes me that there is a potential problem if SETI discover a signal, that it will be, that all the information will be in the hands of Western scientists and maybe Western governments. And
but considering that it's going to be full disclosure,
yeah,
everybody's going to know about it. So everybody's going to.
Well, right now we're talking about privately funded Western institutions that are doing almost all the research, right? And they have no incentive to to go to the United States government first and say, hey, what do you think? Should we release this information? They have no legal requirement to do so.
Well,
but there will be a political reaction.
Sure, but the political reaction will follow the public release, not.
Well, in the beginning, we were talking about the protocol of a discovery of such a signal, and the protocol says that it'll be disseminated freely. Everybody's going to know about it, and even those countries that are not usually interested in this sort of thing are going to suddenly become interested.
Yeah, but getting back to Nick's question, if the Chinese are building a big dish, I don't think it's going to be quite as sensitive to the square kilometer array, but they could be looking at a completely different star. Now, that's the whole thing about SETI is at any given time, the radio telescopes of the world are looking at a tiny, all the radio telescopes in the world are looking at a tiny fraction of the sky, less than 1%. So the Chinese could be looking at a different target than we're looking at, and they detect a beacon. And they internally convince themselves that it is a real beacon. Are we confident that they will share that via this protocol? My answer is no.
No. I'd
Right.
say no.
Right. They didn't write that. They didn't write our protocol. We wrote that.
Well, it's not our protocol. There's a committee, international committee that wrote that protocol.
Okay.
They're scientists. They're
Does
not.
that
But it's
international
not
committee
ratified.
include the
It's
Chinese?
not ratified by any kind of government, including any Western government. It's not an accepted, governmental paper.
The United States government doesn't even recognize
Right.
the existence of SETI in terms
Exactly.
Right.
Right.
I mean,
it's not. There's zero
Just out of
funding
curiosity,
for
Are
it.
the Chinese included in that international committee?
Yes, I believe they are. Although I don't know if they have any representatives on the detection protocol committee.
Now,
That's
granted, if there would be a major contact event happening of some sort, there's some known entities that I think that any wise government would probably be consulting. Now, again, going back to Paul's point, though, we're talking mostly when we talk about government that collaborate with one another, we're talking about Western governments and maybe the Japanese. Japanese are involved with space activities, International Space Station, et cetera, but other more kind of quote unquote raw government, or even maybe the Chinese, which there's some collaboration with the Chinese, but it's not the greatest ones. I suppose.
Well, that said, I think the odds that the Chinese will just be the first ones to find a beacon that nobody else is seeing are pretty low. But because they really can't point that monster very much, they have a pretty limited area of the sky they can look at, and it sweeps. It's more like a giant Big Ear or like Arecibo.
Right.
Actually, it's better than Big Ear, but
But there are other technological possibilities. The Chinese had a rover on the moon for, I think, 2 years before Western scientists knew about it. And if they were to put a radio telescope on the far side of the moon, they might have a chance of detecting something that nobody else would detect, and they might not let anybody know about it.
That's true. I mean, I'm sure they don't have that yet. But
would a potential space launch by the Chinese not be detectable by other?
I think we knew they had a rover on the moon. I just that they weren't sharing the data that much.
No, but I think that what Nick was talking about was an hypothetical launch by the Chinese on the far side of the moon.
If you're going to put a radio telescope on the far side, you're going to need a lot of launches. Yeah, we would know about those.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I don't know if you could actually get away with launching a spacecraft.
Well, we might not know they built the instrument. That would be more difficult to know.
To hide from.
We only have one U.S. satellite orbiting the moon right now, and it's way past its warranty. So.
But as space launch costs come down and satellites become more reasonable in cost, it no longer is just the other major nation states that can afford a space program. It becomes anybody who can afford an effort, and that's several thousand billionaires in the world today could privately
the billionaires actually have more flexibility to do this than governments. Yeah, and of course you have India is now a major player. And
with the privatization of space travel now and things like this nature, it's going to be the billionaires and the big business and the people who are building the vehicles who are going to suddenly become very interested in this sort of thing.
And if they get a stream of proprietary data that no one else has, the likelihood of them sharing it, I would say, is not very high.
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, Think about it. I mean, what? There's no money to be made from keeping it private. So why not just share it?
Surely the prestige of saying to the world that they've made this discovery would be so great that they would.
Well, what if you have a Bracewell probe that's transmitting science that we don't possess yet?
Well, that's different.
Well, I think the Bracewell probe. I'm counting on them to be smarter than we are, and to make sure that it goes out on enough frequencies and enough, and wide enough beam that anybody could detect it.
That's a pretty vague counting on something that.
Well, anybody could send a probe to another star smarter than we are.
Right, but I mean, they sent it out 100,000 years ago or something to that effect, and
100,000 years ago is a blink of an eye. Blink of an eye.
I don't know if I'd count on the plausibility of counting on the people who created the probe to make it secret to the people that they don't even know yet.
Well, the people. No, I think it's not. We're not talking about people who created the probe. We're talking about a much more sophisticated technological civilization than we have, and we're talking about a probe that is smarter than a human. I think that's what we're talking about. Yeah.
But we do not know if sociological and moral development always tracks with technological development. It's entirely possible there might be an incredibly naive but technologically advanced civilization that bumbles around.
Like we have now.
Right. So I think that's one of the things. I think that's one of the in my opinion, one of the challenges to be able. That kind of goes back to what we were talking at the beginning. In my opinion, one of the challenges is that there's so many potential hypothetical scenarios and what I call sub scenarios for detection that it's very difficult to come up with any kind of structured protocol to react to any possible situation that might present itself, especially considering that we do not know, what kind of extraterrestrial history, if you want, there's out there.
Which is exactly why the SETI protocol is just that. It's detection of an ETI signal.
Right.
It's not meant to cover all these.
It's a blueprint. It's like a basic blueprint.
Yeah,
that's all.
The fevered imagination of Arthur C. Clarke is not quite covered in this protocol.
Yeah. In other words, it depends on the intent of the alien who sent it in the first place. For example, to go back to my analogy of the Voyager, we sent it out with the intent of waving hello and singing Kumbaya, around their star. I mean, with the disc and the pictures and the album of the music and the sounds from Earth, basically we were, trying to extend the shaking hand.
Well, and I don't think it was even. I think it was even less ambitious than that. It was about getting the human race to agree on.
Okay, all right.
On what message we would send.
All right, let me go on with the scenario here. In other
nobody's
words,
ever going to intercept that message.
Obviously, it was a very friendly type of thing. The only problem with that is that it's also full of plutonium. Now, this Bracewell probe that you're talking about. Bracewell. I'm sorry. Bracewell probe that you're talking about. In other words, it would be the same sort of thing. Now, is this thing deliberately trying to be, overt in sending out its information? Does it have these instructions?
The classic Bracewell probe,
or does it have this secretive thing about it, and
no.
we can't figure out what it wants? And is it hostile or?
No, there like Ciro just pointed out, there's a million possible scenarios, but the classic Bracewell probe that Ronald Bracewell described in 1960, its purpose is to let us in on the fact that we are part of a much larger galactic community. Now it is an extended shaking hand kind of thing. It is, yes, and it's really not to share technology with us. It's simply to let us know, hey, welcome to the club.
Yeah,
get your shit together, right? It's not even the day the Earth says still. What if you guys don't make peace with each other? We're going to kill you. It's just, there's
No,
a
that
good.
would be, that would be an
certainly
alien
could-
encounter. That would be totally different. But
But it could be that. It could be that any alien artifact is going to be incredibly an object of incredible curiosity of another civilization. The basis of many science fiction stories and at least one movie is that a probe is sent out precisely so it will be taken up by a nascent civilization and destroy them so they don't become a rival or a challenge.
Well, any scenario that we come up with is going to be It's going to be humans only can come up with these
Well,
scenarios.
if they want to destroy us, they're not going to give us a warning, right?
Aliens,
They're
unless
gonna
the
just-
aliens are human.
If they want to destroy us, they'll just destroy us. There's nothing we can do to stop that.
Well, I mean,
Maybe they have protocols for destroying certain civilizations that are considered problematic.
That would be us, bro.
Yeah.
I mean, your definition of the Bracewell Probes.
They're going to take one look at Donald Trump and say, destroy those bastards. Right?
Yeah, I mean, your definition of the Bracewell Probes specifically were essentially friendly, but the question is, how much information do you think it would have on it? Like I
Well-
said, just to use the analogy again, would it have information, for example, a friendly disc of music or something, or is it just to say hello and there's nothing else? And if we look at the probe and we have enough knowledge to reverse engineer it, maybe we'll learn stuff that way. Or does it have stuff on it, like, for example, the Voyager, which actually carries a phonograph to play the damn record, giving them basically the technology that we have?
that is, you could invent a lot of different.
I mean, it's impossible
scenarios.
to anticipate. There could certainly be more questions than answers if one of these objects would surface into our solar system at a range that would be detectable by us humans, and or maybe even better, at a range where it could be captured by some sort of technology that I don't think we have at this point, unless it comes really close to the Earth atmosphere.
Well, if I were designing a Bracewell probe, which by the way I have done, although nobody built it, I would put it. I would give it the capability to easily evade Earth technology for capturing it. And there's actually an easy way to do that, which is to put it in an extremely highly elliptical orbit, which goes way out past the orbit of Pluto, comes back in every few hundred years, checks on how things are going on the Earth, and then zips back out. We would never... we could never find it.
We do it not with current technology anyway. I mean, we know that there's tens of thousands or more of near Earth objects that have yet to be detected. Correct?
Yeah, that's right. But look at all. I mean, we also know that there are probably billions of comets that we can't see right now.
Right.
Because we don't have they're just too faint. And this Bracewell probe would spend most of its life being way too faint for even advanced technology to find, and then you just sort of come in and check on how things are doing, and then zip back out, and it would be that's the easy dumb way to do it. There's probably more sophisticated ways to become uncapturable,
Right.
or cloaking,
Cloak
stealth.
technology.
Yeah,
There could be
I
more
mean,
technology.
cloaking and stealth technology that are way beyond even anything we can come up with, right? even think about right now.
Now I'd like to ask a question that sort of goes off on a tangent. And I'm not a military-minded person. I have the habit of wanting to extend the shaking hand. But there are those people, when the Voyagers were sent down, that were worried about, in fact, there's people now talking about should we have actually put those things on the Voyager and the Pioneers for that matter, because there's also other information on the Pioneers that went out there. They're actually questioning whether or not they should have put that sort of information and that sort of friendly handshake, disc with music and all that. Should we have done that? There's the military-minded people that wondering if we're just sort of like the puppy dog going out there and hoping that they're not going to get kicked in the balls, kind of.
Well, that goes into the entire discussion of what is referred to as METI, if I'm not mistaken, right, Paul?
Right,
Messaging
METI.
extraterrestrial intelligence. It's a big debate going on right now, as some people believe that it would be wise, to have an initiative to try to proactively message extraterrestrial civilization. And there's a big controversy. Well, not a big, but there's a controversy going on where some people believe that that's not necessarily one of the smartest thing to do.
Anyway, because basically the Voyagers gave whoever finds it, if they find it, our email address. Basically,
we are much louder than Voyager. Voyager, we send out radar since the 1940s. We have been sending out radar beacons into space that are quite powerful and small, pretty high effective gain. We have been.
The radio signal is much further than Voyager by now.
Well, that's true. That's true. But I mean, literally, the Voyager has where we came from.
It would be easier to check
the size of us, a phonograph record of all the sounds, and in other words,
no.
Basically,
if Voyager will get there much later than our microwaves, and will have much less information in it. So essentially, any sufficiently advanced technology that's out there will know we're here as soon as our microwaves reach them.
There would have to be such a casual encounter, very very probabilistically low, the encounter with some sort of spacecraft, right? Alien spacecraft going into the vicinity. But think how tiny voyage. I mean, that would be such a probabilistically low occurrence. That's something
right.
Like
but
that.
In terms of our microwave bubble, the probability is high.
Yeah.
So in other words, it's. I mean, I am not of that military mind, but I just wanted to voice those voices that are.
Well, let's face. I mean,
in other words, it's ridiculous to even worry about the fact that we posted our address and phone number.
Yeah. Seth Shostak has made this argument that if anybody wants to destroy us, they already know we're here, and we can't stop them. And the purpose of the message would be to signal to a friendly civilization.
Yeah, better to signal
that we would like to have a conversation. Now, I personally don't think it's very hopeful given the technology we have now, but it's. I think it's worth a shot. It's one of those things that are what they call small bets, right? It doesn't cost much, and it could have tremendously high payoff.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, again, I wasn't voicing my own opinion. I was just sort of voicing what I've heard. I personally think it's better to send out a shaking hand, with sounds and all, and even an address, than to go out there with no information at all and have them wonder what the hell we're doing.
Yeah, there's a number of people that believe.
Board,
To your point, Patrick, there's a number of people that believe actually that the wise thing to do would be to just stay quiet if we get any kind of signal, because they think that by advertising our presence, that would put us at a certain probabilistic risk of a hostile action. So some people think that the status quo, which is, let's stay low, let's not advertise our presence, is probably the wise thing to do. It's a matter of personal philosophy. It's a matter of how people perceive danger in a way. There's different approaches that different people have to this question.
Yeah. Well, my own sense of it is that if there is a hostile civilization out there, A, we would be a low priority, and B, we would, there's nothing we can do to stop it. We're already doomed if that's the case. So,
not necessarily.
And see that we may be an easy target.
If we live in a cosmic wilderness, like I suggested in my WOW signal burst, that has occasional apex predators out there that wander through the wilderness and mark their territory, the quietness of the universe might be other people, other civilizations just lying low. And
exactly.
the fact that we haven't been destroyed isn't the fact that we can't be destroyed, but just the complete indifference of an apex predator to a small civilization that's of no great moment. But if it happened to come along while we're making a lot of noise, it might decide to swat us just because we're an annoyance.
Well, predators, what they do is they get cheap and easy free energy. And we don't represent a lot of free energy. So I would think that such a predator was really looking for something way beyond what we could offer.
No, there's always the other spectrum. Okay, now we can say, okay, we have a vision that is way too anthropomorphic, but there's also some of the visions that we have of hypothetical extraterrestrial civilization that are a bit too a bit too artificial, in the sense that we always envision this civilization as being either extremely powerful or extremely much more advanced than the Earth civilization. On the other hand, there's always a possibility that some civilization out there is indeed very close and very similar to the evolutionary track that the Earth has followed.
Well, but I mean,
I've
probabilistically,
always
that's
said
pretty low odds. I mean,
Well, I've always said that there could be planets out there with just vegetation and insects and maybe some dinosaurs and whatever. And
Well, there can be some planet that is following the exact or very similar evolutionary line that
at the
that
same
Earth
time.
has followed. I know that's kind of a little.
That's the problem with it. The odds of that being at the same time are very low
No, yeah, you're right.
Now, what about the
Not
worst case
necessarily.
scenario?
and nearby.
What about the worst case scenario? Let's talk about Orson Scott Card's the Formic Wars. So we've advanced to the point where we're mining the asteroids and even the Kuiper Belt, and the free miners are out there in the Kuiper Belt. And this little girl who's on the astronomy tower type of in the spacecraft discovers an alien spacecraft, a near light speed alien spacecraft coming toward us. When that family, by the way, they were Italian, when that family,
Well, of course they were.
decided
Patrick.
to try to warn Earth. They basically got the society, of course, was like, yeah, UFOs, here we go, laughter. And by the time the Earth actually realized, or even Luna actually realized that this person was telling the truth or whatever, let's make a long story short, the Formics were already on their way, and they had already destroyed a lot of the free miners' crafts, et cetera, so forth and so on. So that's worst case scenario. There's an alien spacecraft that's been traveling the galaxy for a long time. It's near light speed. It's been discovered, and it is not of a species that even understands us. They're just out to look for another home, and they don't give a shit. They're going to exterminate us because we're like bugs to them. And Formic, by the way, is some sort of Latin word for ants, because they are like ant-like creatures. But forget about the sci-fi for a minute. The point is that a totally alien, different mindset coming here just to find another world, and they think that we're just a bunch of bugs.
So, I mean, what's the upshot?
Worst case
What does that
scenario.
mean?
What can you possibly do about that? I mean, that's one of those things, one of those scenarios where it's almost inevitable, right?
Well, in a science fiction story, there has to be an interesting conflict, right? It has to be
What I mean to say is, how do we,
the
do we
ability
react
to
better than the Orson
fight
Scott
back.
Card science fiction? Do we react better than that? Do we react in a way
No.
that's more intelligent, or are we going to be just like the Orson Scott Card science
Well,
fiction?
no. Science fiction is written in a certain way to that where the conflict is interesting, right? But
Exactly.
the reality is, in none of these cases would the conflict be interesting. It would be like stepping on ants.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Another interruption. I think you said something about stepping on ants.
Yeah, well, a science fiction story, any fiction story, has to be written so the conflict is interesting, right? So there's some chance that the good guy can beat the bad guy. If not, it wouldn't be in a good story. But
there has to be some drama. There has to be some sort of drama.
Yeah.
Enhanced drama.
Or some plot twist.
I wanted to use the science fiction as a
Now they
second
often
point,
cheat, right? And
Right.
Independence Day, which I think is the worst big budget movie I ever saw.
but let's
They uploaded a virus from a MacBook.
Well, let's forget about the entire rest of the book about the Formic Wars.
It could be.
Let's look at the beginning of the story where this little girl scientist discovers this ship that is near light speed headed towards our solar system.
Yeah.
So what is the actual reaction? Do we be stupid like the book, like the science fiction was, or is there going to be some communication with some real scientists? That's the question I'm asking.
Well, it's not going to be like a science fiction book, Patrick. Never, ever. Those are written to be entertaining. They're not written to be I mean,
you know what I'm saying. Have you read the Orson Scott Card? You know what I'm saying.
I've read some of his stuff. But I mean, I've read a lot of science fiction. It's not about. I mean, it's really not about aliens. It's about people, right? It's
Right.
about so. If you really want to talk about aliens, they really are alien. They're going to do things that have nothing to do with anything we could possibly write down.
Yeah.
Or
The whole scenario was that communication started going down because these formics actually used gamma rays to power their ship.
and they reverse the polarity of the neutron flow. You know, you can make up all the crap you want. It doesn't.
They decelerate. They
doesn't make any
interfere
difference.
with the communication. So the communication wasn't getting through to the Earth, and that's why the Earth panicked before they were there already. By the time they got there, but what I'm asking is there going to be worldwide panic? You know, if somebody says yes, there is an alien craft on its way, or
Yes.
is there going to be some communication?
Well, of course there'll be communication, but
A lot of it is going to just come down to pure contingency. You know, if the person who makes the detection happens to know somebody in the scientific community and it gets passed along very rapidly, that's one scenario. If the person who makes the detection knows the host of a talk show and the first thing they do is get on the radio and broadcast all over the world, then you've got a very different scenario.
Yeah, there was a 3 or 4 parts documentary about a year ago or so that was kind of, it was depicting some sort of hypothetical scenario, but they try to make it as realistic as possible. I forgot what channel was, if it was Discovery Channel or one of those, but basically there was as realistic as it could be. Some person, detecting some probes coming towards Earth and then contacting the scientific community, et cetera, et cetera. So they were trying to figure out what would happen, what hypothetically would happen if there was some sort of event of that nature. But I think that, the point again is that there's way too many possibilities. There's the possibility that the aliens are going to be extremely boring. At the end of the day, it's going to be a non-story. I mean, it's going to be a story at first, always.
No, it's like what the Firesign Theater. Everybody must learn to play the piano. It could. Right, you're right. They could be boring. They could become here.
I mean, yeah, of course, the initial event of encountering an extraterrestrial civilization is interesting in and of itself. It's never happened in the history of humankind, but doesn't mean that we're gonna necessarily learn. Well, I don't know. That's kind of arguable. You could argue you're always gonna learn a lot by encountering some civilization from another planet, but there's so many different possibilities. Maybe we cannot communicate with these people.
Well,
maybe it's impossible.
Or more likely, it's something we couldn't even think of right now.
Right. I mean, I guess the central point is that it's very difficult to have every individual scenario on paper and document, and document or write down what to do in every situation. It's an exercise that would be excruciatingly complicated, I think.
Well,
impossible. You have to try to break it down into it. It's not impossible if you break it down into a taxonomy. You just have to approach it systematically and say, what are the classes of kind of contacts?
Yeah.
What are the classes of responses? And I think that can be done in a fairly transparent way, not a perfect way. Every model is imperfect.
Well, and the thing is, whatever it is that you think of is probably going to be wrong, right?
Well, I'm with Ciro on this. I mean that's basically what I was saying right from the beginning, because I was saying that every scenario we come up with, as there are thousands of scenarios, maybe tens of thousands, it's human scenarios.
Well, scientifically,
it's the way we think.
Scientifically,
we can't think like aliens unless they're human, right?
Right. Well, scientifically, we can only base ourselves on what anthropomorphically we know based on the history of humankind. We can only apply scientific principles of Occam razor and say, okay, these are the most likely scenario. I mean, if I were to do a taxonomy, like Nick suggested, I would probably, and try to do it on a scientific basis, I would say, okay, first, let's see what the most possible things are to happen. the most possible way that an extraterrestrial civilization might try to contact us, or the most possible way that we detect signal, the most possible way that we detect the probe, and those sort of things first. And then maybe we can go down the road of looking at more exotic possibilities, if you want.
I would argue we don't even know what those probabilities are. They all dependent upon our estimate of what the priors are, which tend to be highly biased. So,
well, yeah, but I mean, what can we base on? What can be?
Well,
what can we base ourselves on?
My suggestion would be to not engage in the exercise at all,
right?
But simply to be proactive and say, what can we learn about the universe, and just keep working. I mean, we're doing very well in that. And
I mean, we're doing very well by using our imagination, and we can do the same thing in contact scenarios. We can push ourselves hard to try to come up with some things that people have never thought about it. We can game them through, just like wargaming scenarios, and we can have at least some kind of a rational engagement with the possibility.
Well, I think all sciences are involved, including the sciences of studying other animals. I mean, because we are living creatures, and because we are human, we are apes of the highest intelligence on this particular planet. We can only, as I was saying before, we can only formulate our scenarios in a human way. But we also see how other animals socialize, if they do socialize. From lions and tigers and bears and insects included. So we try to intelligently figure out how these things work. But again, we're talking about alien creatures. On the other hand, life in the universe seems to be coming from the same chemistry. I think at this point in the 21st century,
maybe not. We don't know.
Life in the universe is essentially, similar, not the same, but similar.
We don't have any data.
Any intelligent life would think like us. I don't know.
The reaction of the public opinion to a possible encounter of whatever that encounter might be, it's also, frankly, somewhat unpredictable. I mean, we have example nowadays. We have example of silly things that happen on the internet on a daily basis, where some story or somebody doing something becomes unpredictably viral. To the point that we scratch our head and say, how could that story have become so popular sometimes, So my point is, can we possibly predict what the public opinion at large reaction is going to be in the eventuality of an event, of discovery of a contact from an extraterrestrial civilization, or even just a signal? I don't know. I don't know that we can anticipate that.
I try to comfort myself, given the worst case scenario. I try to comfort myself in thinking that any civilization that manages to travel to another star, if we were to have that first encounter, is of those people, like from here, because we have a bunch of idiots here. We have, half the population is a bunch of stupid idiots and warmongers. But I would hope to think that, like the scientists that we have here are essentially trying to be peaceful, that the people who manage to the intelligent life that manages to go to another star to come here would be like that. In other words, if they manage to do that, then they're out for a peaceful mission. I would like to believe that. I'm not so sure I'm right, but I would like to believe that the people that manage to actually get out there and come here would actually be the peaceful ones from their civilization. Not necessarily that their civilization is all peaceful, but at least the ones that come here would be. I try to comfort myself in that thought.
Okay. Well, let's kind of wrap this up a little bit, since we've been talking about it for an hour.
Well, that was my final statement.
An hour and 19 minutes. What I'm going to do is kind of go around the table here to Adam, Ciro, Nick, and Patrick, and we'll of course you get to give your recommendation. Your recommendation could be anything, right? It doesn't have to be associated with the topic at hand tonight. And then maybe your last thoughts on the topic, and then, of course, after we sign off, you guys can send me links, and we'll have lots of links in the show notes at unseenpodcast.com. This is episode 44, by the way, if you're trying to find the particular blog entry there. Okay. So let's start with Adam.
So any discovery of extraterrestrial intelligence will have profound consequences for our science and our society. I think it will depend largely on the type of phenomena that we encounter. A beacon directed directly at Earth, you know, someone saying hello very close, you know, like 4 or 5 parsecs maybe away, would be very difficult, very different, a very different response from us to us seeing signs of some ancient civilization mining debris disks on the other side of the galaxy. So it would depend on the exact circumstances of the discovery. And I think distance is very important. Finding an alien civilization on our doorstep would have much bigger consequences than us discovering signs of extraterrestrial civilizations many, many light years away. As a recommendation, I'd like to recommend a Hangout that I watched earlier today that you can find on YouTube. It's called Future in Space Hangout, and earlier today they had on the 2 scientists that are proposing that there's a 9th planet in the outer solar system, Professor Batygin and Mike Brown from Caltech. That's it, thanks.
Okay. Ciro. Okay, let's go to Nick.
You're sure that's noise and not an alien signal? Okay.
Well, yeah. That.
Ciro,
you got to stay muted.
Ciro, you're blasting us.
For a final thought, I'd like to return to the earliest scenario mentioned, which is we receive a signal that's a wave and said, "Hey, we're here." I think in that circumstance, there'd be a very big tumult at first, and everybody would be talking about it, and it would quickly fade out of public consciousness, and people would go back to life as usual, except for the scientists studying the signal. So, but as Adam pointed out, there's a whole different range of possible scenarios. For my recommendation, since no one has mentioned it yet, I'd like to recommend this book, After Contact, The Human Response to Extraterrestrial Life by Albert A. Harrison. The folks who are laying the foundation of astrosociology have a very high opinion of this book, and it's an interesting attempt to lay out some of the possible scenarios and consequences of contact.
Okay. There's also a book called Contact with Alien Civilizations that I will provide a link to. I can't remember the author's name, I'm sorry, but from a few years back. Okay, Patrick.
First, I'd like to see if I can help Ciro out here. Ciro, your audio is like really loud, like distorted music.
Yeah.
So I've already made my closing statement about the possibilities of different animal life and the connection between intelligent life somewhere else, the possibility that it's completely different, and the possibility that it's semi-similar. So I'm going to go ahead and make my fanciful recommendation. This has nothing to do with the Hangout, although if you want to call it fantasy, I guess it might have something to do with it. Anybody who has young grandchildren who are just learning about Harry Potter, this is I know that you won't be able to see this on the actual podcast file that Paul Carr is going to give you, but I'm showing it on camera now. It's the Harry Potter series, Tales from Beedle the Bard. This is the book inside of a book that Hermione Granger read, the story of the tale of the three brothers, and that is actually the last story in the book. But it's for anybody who's looking for a cute fairy tale book to read the young children. This is a cute book to read. It's it's magic stuff. It's witches and stuff like that. But it's certainly a lot friendlier than the witches and stuff that I grew up with.
Yeah, I heard that there's going to be another
and
Harry Potter book.
Yeah, but that's the Tales from the Beedle the Bard.
I guess she can't make enough money at that. Okay, Ciro, let's try you again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, okay. No noise, right?
No noise.
I have absolutely no idea what had happened earlier because I haven't changed anything at all. So let's try this again. So basically, yes, I'm just going to reiterate what I had already mentioned it previously, which, in my opinion, we are not. I don't think we are prepared for a possible encounter or any kind of detection of a signal even. I don't think that at large we are prepared. However, having said that, I don't think that it's very easy to be completely prepared, and it would probably take an effort of minds and an effort of time by a lot of people, bright people, to be able to put up a good taxonomical, if you want, plan for any kind of possible scenario out there. So that's kind of the overall, my overall kind of opinion on the whole affair of any kind of reaction to any contact. Regarding the recommendation, actually, I don't know if this has already been recommended in the past or not, but we know how we lovers of space understand how wide and how big space is, but sometimes human perception doesn't allow us to fully appreciate the vastity of space. There's this one particular website that gives an idea of how big just our solar system is, and it's a very interesting visualization on scale of based on pixel. As far as a possible journey just by scrolling from the sun to Neptune. So I have the web address, and I will be obviously passing it along to you, Paul, for the public. But it's joshworth.com, and then there's other parts of the web address. But it's a very interesting visualization that I'd like to share with the rest of the audience. Very interesting.
Okay. Thanks, Jared. I'm glad we got you back there. Folks, if you're listening and you heard all that noise, I'm sorry. I generally don't edit this podcast. I may edit out that bit of noise, though. So if you're wondering what went on, there was a problem with Ciro's connection. So that's up to me now. My feeling about this whole business is that I think the Bracewell Probe situation is at least plausible. Whether we consider it likely or not is largely a matter of personal bias. In that case, I think that the Bracewell Probe would be in control, and we would get the information it wanted us to have. But a far more wide open and likely scenario is an ETI detection of something very far away. Now, as Adam pointed out, something close and something far, by close I mean, within, say, 10 parsecs or so, versus something far away would be, there would be a big difference there, I think. But that detection, I think we have thought through that reasonably well. I don't think there would be a big cultural disruption. I think it would be a huge science story and a huge change in perspective, very similar to the change in perspective we had when we first looked back at the Earth from space. And that would be, I think, in the long run, extremely beneficial to us. So I look forward to that if it ever happens. And I'm kind of optimistic it will happen. But again, the search space is vast, and the funding is tiny, so we're not going to cover that search space quickly. And some people tell me Moore's law is petering out, so that may not be the way we get to cover that search space faster. So my recommendation, I have actually several, but I'll pick one, and I'm just going to arbitrarily pick one. One of my favorite David Bowie albums, or is it Bowie, Adam? Bowie. This is overdue. I know he died a few weeks ago, and that is Scary Monsters. Certainly one of my favorites by him, and you probably heard the song Fashion off of Scary Monsters, but the rest of the album is well worth listening to, Ashes to Ashes. And there's a sort of a follow-up to Space Oddity on that song, one of the songs. So check it out, Scary Monsters by David Bowie. A lot of searing, scorching, angry guitar work from Robert Fripp on that, which is one of my favorite guitarists. So let's wrap this up. This has been Unseen Podcast episode 44. It is the 19th of February, 2016. For more information, go to unseenpodcast.com. If you want to be on the panel, you can send me an email at unseenpodcast@gmail.com, or you can just come over to Google Plus and knock on the door of our community. If you are willing to use your real name, if you are willing to engage in the discussion of what the topic will be prior to appearing on the show, then I will welcome you on the panel. You do not have to be an atheist. You do not have to be a skeptic. You do not have to be a space enthusiast or anything of that thing. You just have to have burning questions about the kind of topics we talk about. And even if your opinions are not quite exactly the same as Patrick's. Okay. So let's say goodnight, folks. It's getting late. Good night, Adam. Or good morning, Adam.
Good morning.
And Ciro.
Yes. Good night. I got my SETI t-shirt here.
Oh, awesome. And Nick.
Good night and thanks.
And Patrick.
Thank you. Good night. And I have an opinion about that.
I'm sure you do. Okay. Good night, folks. This is episode 44. It's the 19th of February, 2016. We'll see you next week for episode 45. And this should be coming out probably on the 20th of February. So go to unseenpodcast.com for more information. Good night.